happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world to the EdTech Situation Room, episode 258 for May the 4th, 200, the year 200 BC, 2022. My name is Wes Fryer. I am coming to you from Oklahoma City, where we are having a very exciting weather evening. Actually, I may be looking at the radar periodically. We've had several tornadoes east of town, and it's just one of those spring nights in Oklahoma. But I am the Technology Integration and Innovation Specialist at the Cassidy School, aka 5th and 6th grade media literacy teacher and 6th grade advisor, just for one more month, which is a bit crazy to realize because May is upon us. But I am joined, as always, by someone who really knows what he's talking about because he's been formally commissioned and knighted the EdTech Guru of the North. He goes in his day job by the name Jason Neiffer. We just know him as EdTech Yoda of the Northern Latitudes. Welcome, Jason.
Well, hi, Dr. Fryer. Indeed, I am here. I am Jason Neiffer. I prefer to think of myself as the executive director of the Montana Digital Academy, which is Montana's state virtual school located on the beautiful University of Montana campus right here in 72-degree Missoula, Montana. The weather is so lovely here, and for those that are others in northern states, you know what I'm talking about because, in fact, I saw, at least in Montana, that it was the cold or the snowiest April in a long time. And usually some Montanans complain about late winter snow, and usually my answer to that is that you live in Montana, so you're going to have to get used to that. But in this particular case, I think people's complaints were pretty legit. So happy to be here. Dr. Fryer, what is this podcast all about?
Well, we are a almost weekly podcast that will take a look at the recent technology news and try to discuss them through the lens of education. So we're looking for patterns and trends, things that impact schools, things that school leaders need to be thinking about. Also, sometimes some things that just as consumers and citizens that we need to think about and consider, and we're just trying to make sense of them. And it actually is, what do you say the name of this podcast is? We're a buddy podcast or something like that?
Yeah, it's a buddy podcast. It could also be kind of a panel podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, so I guess we're EdTech buddies, Dr. Fryer.
There you go. And we've only been doing this for, 257 prior episodes. So we do want to encourage everybody to check out our show notes. You can find those at edtechsr.com/links, or just click the links at the top. Follow us on Twitter. That's where we will let you know about changes to our schedule, which will, by the way, and I'll mention this again, include next week. We will be off next week, but then we will be back again the following week on Wednesday. And we will be making a change at some point in the summer. It may not happen till July or August, just depends on when the old move to North Carolina happens, but we will be moving an hour earlier with our schedule. So tonight's topics on our Google Doc, which we did have to break up into two pieces a while back, but we have episodes 201 on. The first 199 episodes are on a different doc. But the topics are Apple, Google, Microsoft, tech correction, personal technology, privacy, creator world, miscellaneous, and then we'll wrap it up with our Geeks of the Week. So I get you did a great job culling some of the, I think, interesting links that we have skipped in past weeks, which you can do actually now that we're basically bolding links in the doc as we talk about them, and then we're sending that out as a Substack, both the links that we do discuss during the show and the ones that we don't. So sign up at edtechsr.substack.com if you're interested in that free resource, which at some time will be monetized and bring Jason and I countless told riches and allow us to retire, to some undisclosed Caribbean location and simply continue the podcast. But that date remains elusive, and we're not going to, bet on when that'll actually happen. Where would you like to start, Dr. Neiffer, with tonight's discussion?
Well, lots of interesting tech news from the last couple of weeks in the various camps we talk about, Apple, Google, and Microsoft. So let me start with a couple of quick Microsoft pieces of news. And one of them I thought was interesting in part because of, I know there are some tech directors in our audience, But this is an article from a few weeks back from Tom's Guide that talks about how Windows 11 is getting a really big security upgrade. And we haven't talked about Windows 11 much, in part because Dr. Fryer doesn't use any Windows machines. I have a Windows laptop that I did install Windows 11 on. It's been decent. I miss Windows 10 a little bit at least, but the bottom line is that it's just not my daily driver, so I haven't noticed it as much. But this Windows 11 does seem like it's a huge step forward in security, and they've been working on fortifying the operating system, in part, I think, to catch up to where other platforms are at. That arguably the Mac platform and the Chrome OS platform are more secure, in part because they control the hardware in most of those scenarios. So there is some ability there to put a more secure environment into place. But there is a new feature coming called Smart App Control, and it's designed to prevent users from unknowingly running malicious apps on your machine. And so it sounds like a very interesting piece. It's another layer of security. But one of the reasons why I want to mention this is because that you may or may not be able to utilize the feature in full unless you wipe your machine and start over again. So reinstall Windows 11 from scratch. Now, for me personally, I reinstall the operating system on any active desktop or laptop at least every 6 months. Sometimes I go a year, but I find that there's just so much cruft that grows. It's particularly bad in Windows, but I've also noticed that this impacts the Mac operating systems as well. So that's not a huge deal for me personally, but if you're managing labs or one-to-one laptops and you have started going all in on Windows 11 and want to have what sounds like a pretty useful feature for an enterprise to have turned on, you may need to completely wipe your computer and start over again. So I just mentioned that because Windows is by far the dominant operating system in enterprises, and if you are in that position of supporting those types of operating systems, I know how frustrating that is to have things that don't work unless you wipe the machine. And Wes, when you used to be a tech director, how frequently were you wiping daily user machines?
Great question. That's exactly what I was going to comment on. I just was going to a face-to-face conference this week in Orlando, Florida, and I did particularly relish the parts that we're talking about cybersecurity and all the responsibility for the network, realizing that I am no longer responsible for all these things. But we would wipe our labs, which we still had at that time, and we do have a couple portable carts still, even though we're one-to-one with iPad in the lower school and our elementary and then middle school with Chromebooks, BYOD for high school or upper division. We had language labs, and that would just be part of, the summer maintenance would be, wiping those, updating those. We definitely found that it was generally preferable not to be installing significant updates during the year because of dependencies and things that different apps would have, and just, trouble that could cause for faculty and students. So it was an annual summer kind of thing. But we've mentioned this on the show before. I do think that your idea of periodically purging and completely wiping your machine is excellent advice. And it's really a lot like, people will say when you do a time change, which did the government vote to stop the time change or something? I think I don't know if I read about that. It's just, I know Peggy in Arizona, they don't do daylight savings time. But anyway, a regular time of the year, just to trigger in your mind, hey, I need to change my air filters in my HVAC system. Hey, unfortunately, it's not quite as easy. I'm going to wipe my machine and reinstall all my software. Thankfully, it has become a little easier. But I've helped some teachers through the years do this process, and it can be extremely forbidding and scary. Sometimes it's required because you have a virus, and it's just, if you have a significant malware virus issue, a lot of times the safest procedure, especially on a Windows machine, but this could be for a Mac too, is to just completely reinstall from scratch. But sometimes people don't have the installation licenses and hardware, that used to be more of an issue. I don't think that is right now. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you can just download Windows 11 and create a bootable USB, and there you go. And so, we all need to have our IT people in our lives, whether it's at school and work or it's at home. And many of you listening to this podcast very well may be the family IT person who has to take that kind of responsibility. So it's good to keep in mind. And I think that, this is actually Microsoft sort of following in line with Apple. They made permission changes several major operating system iterations ago, and this can be somewhat painful, but you really have to be more granular in granting permissions. And for example, when you install Zoom, you have to go into the accessibility control panel, and if you're going to do screen sharing, then you have to allow the specific Zoom application to be able to have permission to have control of the camera. And so that kind of granular permission is designed to raise user awareness of what systems are doing, and hopefully limit and restrict what malware systems or programs are able to do, and prevent the hijacking of your computer for malicious purposes. So I think this is a good thing that Microsoft is doing. I don't know that schools are offering anything like this as like a parent university sort of thing, but it certainly would be kind of cool in the community for somebody to offer, some do-it-yourself. Hey, bring your flash drive. We're going to install Windows bootable, Windows 11 systems, and talk about that kind of thing. I have not heard of anybody doing that kind of thing. But it is something that you just kind of need to figure out on your own. Fortunately, YouTube and the web community is very supportive as you Google for help for these kind of things, and it is possible to figure a lot of that out. But it also is the case that many people need more hand-holding, but it bears reminding people of the possibility. And I'm also glad to see Microsoft, again, following Apple and just providing downloadable versions of their OS so that you can install it. It's not like, oh man, I don't have my installation CD. And then we're like, and I don't even have a CD drive for my computer anymore. I mean, things have changed quite a bit. So it's good to see Microsoft making these moves.
And I want to share one other quick article that may also rile some tech director types. This was a really interesting article from Tech Radar, and Joe Kalili argues that based on the evidence available, Microsoft is probably developing Windows 12 at this point, and it may be a cloud-only or a cloud-based operating system. And when I first read this, I was envisioning, well, I mean, that's kind of Chrome OS, right? I mean, it's a cloud-based operating system because you really can't meaningfully install things locally. You can if you want an Android app. You can if you want to put Linux on your Chrome operating system, a laptop or box, and then run a Linux app. But that's for that's kind of for the super nerds and not for the everyday users, even power users. But that's not what this is. That Microsoft seems to be developing a version of Windows that essentially everything exists in the cloud. So it's basically streaming to you via X, right? And then the storage is in the cloud, the computing power is in the cloud, and you could probably have a relatively modest laptop. And of course, for those who have been around for a while, you may remember thin clients as being a way to do this, and you could run a terminal server. In fact, there was both Windows options, and then also I got my start as a kind of wannabe IT guy 15, 18, maybe more years ago, installing the Linux terminal server project. And there was a K-12 version of that ran around, so you could create it. And I loved playing with it. It wasn't really that useful to me, but I loved playing with it. But I guess Wes is both an end user and, as you mentioned in the past, a recovering IT director. Cloud thoughts about Cloud OS, like where it's streamed. Have you ever used or managed an environment that was thin client based?
I've worked with people who have and talked to the evangelists of that. This is the future. This is what we all need to do. And you're right. I mean, Chrome OS is largely almost like a thin client environment where very little is installed on the client side and pretty much everything's running over the web. The author of that article points out, there are different views in Microsoft, and some, I guess, have recently said that's not a vision for the company. The digital divide and the fact that, as they say, connectivity is not evenly distributed across the globe, latency, just like we have with gaming, these things become issues depending upon the type of application that you're talking about and the sort of situation and context that you're in. Outages from your ISP, could just take you offline and you wouldn't be able to function. And they also point out that computer manufacturers themselves, justify much higher price tags on computers that have more horsepower to drive things because they're not thin clients. Thin clients tend to be very cheap and affordable, and it's essentially a monitor and a computer that connects to the internet. I was thinking, I got to hear Gary Stager give a presentation and catch up with him a little bit at this conference. And, he points out that the Raspberry Pi at $25, $35, whatever, it's an amazingly robust computer, And so if you think about like actually moving forward with the digital divide, I think it's a very exciting prospect to go towards a cloud future. But we also have to think about privacy and hacks and those kinds of things. I mentioned on the show, I'm sure over a year ago, he's our debate coach and teacher, and he also was on our IT team for a while. And he had a situation where he could take his phone and plug it in and basically like have a whole Windows OS environment at one point, with a keyboard and everything. And it was like, wow, that's really something to think about. Here's my computer that I have with me all the time, and maybe I can just jack in wherever I need to, and and have private files and my password managers and all the kinds of things that I need to have access to. So I think it is definitely a part of the future. And we've talked about the importance of more secure operating systems and finally leaving behind the legacy, especially of the code base of Windows. And so, Microsoft is continuing to move in that direction, but they've got so many legacy users, enterprise users that, I wonder if they wouldn't have some kind of a fork that's going to allow people to still have a more traditional, OS based. You don't have to be having things in the cloud, because there still are folks that don't trust the cloud and don't want to embrace that cloud vision of computing in the future. But I think it's definitely where we've been headed, and there's so many benefits from a management standpoint, just like with Chromebooks, right? Hey, great, let's power wash your device. Great, let's give you a swap. I mean, you absolutely can't do that with any kind of other OS system other than a thin client that you're working with, because you have native applications to install. You've got gigabytes generally of applications and sometimes user data that you have to move to the new device, because I've done that repeatedly with different people when they either get a new machine or, something happens, it breaks, it's in repair, they need a swap. So when you've experienced that, the beauty of getting, and I do this on a daily basis with my student Chromebook that the school has issued to all of our middle school teachers, something's gone wrong with the kid's laptop. Here's mine. Log in as yourself, email help desk,
Right.
just use it for the day. I mean, it is incredibly beautiful. And if we were using basically any other kind of computing device today, the students wouldn't have the same user experience when I hand them my Chromebook as they do with their own. And that is, it's an absolute game changer. So Microsoft is certainly understanding, or some people are understanding the power of that and wanting to move that beyond the sort of Chromebook experience, which many people still consider to be underpowered and really not enough for the enterprise. When Microsoft embraces that and has that offered, there'll be, more enterprise users. I'm sure they're going to be like, well, okay, I guess, Microsoft is going this direction, and that's where we need to go to. So again, I think it's a positive.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see. Shall we do some Google news as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
Probably there's a lot of interesting stories in Google the last few weeks, but the one that I want to talk about, because it's the most interesting to me right now, is The Verge had an article yesterday, and I actually noticed this when I was playing around the other day in the Google Docs. But Google Docs has an updated table structure inside of the online word processor that includes things like putting drop-down menus into things like tables if you want to do them or to track something. And this follows the functionality they added a couple of months ago where you can type a code or put in an insert of a box that essentially turns a Google Doc into an email that you can send via Gmail by essentially filling out the to and the subject, and it will send your email through your Gmail that you constructed in Google Docs. So for those long, wonderful, thoughtful emails, and for those of you that work as I do in distance learning, know there's a lot of email, and sometimes you have to be extra careful on how you engage with issues. Pre-writing in a Google Doc is pretty great. So I thought this was a really interesting thing. And it feels like that at least for me, for a little while, Office 365 was catching up to Google Docs, and in some ways started exceeding Google Docs, because it started adding in all the traditional functionality from Word into the web-based system, which I thought was very clever and probably the inevitable process that Microsoft would go through with an online Office product. But it feels like that, at least in the last 12, 18 months, Google is innovating in the doc space. And I keep noticing every couple months there's new functionality. It's coming out pretty quickly. They're adding in some interesting things about the way you interact with other people on your Google domain if you're using it professionally. And I think it's a really exciting process that they're going through here. So any thoughts, Dr. Fryer?
Super cool. I definitely think project management is a hugely important thing for us to help students have experiences with and use tools. I know I'm thinking of a friend in Maine who has worked with different project-based learning tools, and whose name is eluding me right now. But, some of these were licensed and things that you paid for. But managing projects, being able to list timelines, being able to track status, anything like that that's going to help. You can have full on, maybe not Microsoft Project, but those kind of Trello. I mean, there's a host of different tools that will help you with those kind of things, and I think that's fantastic to see Google integrating those. And then that's an opportunity for us as teachers. Even as I think about projects, I did a presentation I'll share as a Geek of the Week some more about, but it's a multi-part, multi-lesson unit that has all these different steps for students to create, and something that helps kids keep track of where they are, what they need to have done, and then how to coordinate that with others, which we're not really doing in this particular unit. Hugely important, and that really looks helpful. Love to see this kind of innovation from Google.
Wonderful. Okay, some other interesting Google news for your consideration. YouTube, this was last week, rolled out Super Thanks, which is a way to give money to creators on YouTube. And I think I'm pretty sure you have to have a minimum number of followers to be able to do that. In fact, a lot of the cool tools are turned off until you get 1,000 followers, which I think you've got well past that on your personal YouTube channel, right?
I went over 2,000 here in the last month or so. So yeah.
But I think it's a really interesting thing, and I don't feel any issues with the fact that as a content creator myself with Dr. Fryer, I'm not rolling in the Benjamins or anything, but I do this for something well beyond the compensation. If this was a 10, 12, 15-hour project a week instead of a couple-hour project a week, I might feel differently. But I do think it's good that these platforms are coming up with mechanisms to directly compensate creators. And the reason why I like that is because it lessens the need for advertising and tracking. And the bottom line is that we really can't have it both ways. We can't have things for free and platforms that are free and then not expect to be advertised to. I still think there's a lot of work we could do on the privacy aspect of the advertising. The advertising is not going away. So interesting piece there.
Let me drop in a quick link, because I literally talked to my students about this today and last week in the context of Patreon and YouTubers. The link that I dropped in is Jared Haley. Have you heard of this a cappella singer before, Jason? He does all kinds of covers for like Queen. This is the one I put in is for Imagine Dragons. He makes all the music himself with his voice. Cool. And he puts himself in all these different screens. He does Pirates of the Caribbean, Game of Thrones, just like he's amazing. And so I do periodically some wonder links for my kids. We talk about the intersection of technology with different things. And we went to his page because we've been talking, especially in our sixth grade class, about, how do we vet a source? How do we figure out who somebody is? And so we, go into his YouTube page and subscribers and what does he say, but his Patreon page. And I was talking explicitly about Patreon. What is that? And some of the kids know, and this is a way of supporting. And we talked about Leonardo da Vinci. How did he do what he did in the Renaissance? These painters and artists and sculptors, right? They had sponsors. But today, individuals can be sponsored by hundreds or thousands of people out there in the world who, even give them small payments. But his model, and it looks like that's what this super thanks tool in the YouTube studio would allow you on a per video basis. Like if somebody wanted to give you $1 for each new video that you create. And so interesting to see YouTube, of course, wanting to capture part of that revenue stream. And I'm sure Patreon isn't super excited about that. But I think from the creator community side, seeing more ways that creators can monetize and more easily, it's all about the friction, right? Frictionless giving. Yes, I'll give you $1 every month. I mean, that's the dream of so many companies and individuals. So we need to be wary of that. We've talked about tools that help us, Mint and others keep abreast of our subscriptions and making sure we're not, oversubscribed and whatever. But I do think, and that's something that's come out of our conversations, Jason, and I haven't quite done this yet, but like Jared may be somebody I do want to support with Patreon. It's just a wonderful, wonderful thing. The arts matter. And we have, believe it or not, amidst all the, pollution and darkness and negative things that we hear about technology, there's some really, really amazing, compelling, wonderful things that are being done and shared and created by people. And these tools are enabling folks to do that. So I did not know about that. And since I do have a few subscribers on my channel, I'm going to go into the studio and check it out, and not planning to quit my day job tomorrow. But, I do get a check almost every month for about $100 from YouTube, largely because of my cooking videos now, which I was originally going to set up another channel. And I'm like, I'm not going to spend the time to build this channel up to 1,000. I'm just putting it on my regular channel. And so anyway, it's one of these ways that I do have insight and playing with the media. I learn about YouTube by using it as a platform and seeing what can be done. And I think it helps me remain literate and more knowledgeable about the media of our time, which is increasingly video, as we're speaking over video today, being transcribed on Facebook, and who knows where we're being archived with each word. So.
Yeah, well, and let's just take a moment of appreciation of the fact that you get $100 a month for putting up videos, primarily cooking. That's just a passion and a hobby of yours. And, I would be willing to bet that people on cable access 7, 30 years ago, when that was your primary way of broadcasting, weren't pulling home whatever the equivalent was of, $100 a month to be able to do that. So, I wish YouTube didn't have the problems that it did. And one of the reasons why it doesn't have the problems for me is because I pay them $10 a month to take the ads away. But it's still a real wonder to me. And I think and I personally give, I think probably 7 or 8 creators now a little bit of money a month through Patreon.
And that's, that for a long time, I hadn't gotten rid of my earlier hosting company, and I was paying too much, more than I want to admit to my wife, monthly for hosting. But that now just about covers my hosting costs that I pay for the 20 to 30 websites, and
right, the rest of your empire.
But as I would encourage everybody to think about, who do we support? Not only companies, I said we subscribe to Spotify, I support T-Mobile. There's these different companies that I'm buying services from. But I think this is a valuable cultural question for us to consider just personally, in terms of, because, just with, well, I'm going to sound like an advertisement, for pennies a day, you can be sustaining creators. But it's true. I mean, as multiple people, share a little of their wealth and give money out here, it's like, and I'm not saying that Jared Hallie is Leonardo da Vinci, but he is an amazing creative guy. I mean, I don't know how long it takes him to edit these videos that have like 25 different screens with him doing all kinds of things. It's really a joy to see that kind of thing. But I think on a personal level, and it could be something that we find a way to talk to kids about, because who knows, there's probably kids sitting in our classrooms right now. In fact, I'm sure there are, who want to be creators of some kind. And in this new economy, yes, there's dark sides of the gig economy and whatever. And maybe you're going to need a spouse and significant other who's going to have healthcare insurance if you live in the United States. But, there's opportunities for creators that simply did not exist even a few short years ago. And Patreon and this idea of the micro payments economy, where we're able to very easily give small amounts of money as a thank you, or as a I'm helping support you. It's cool, and I'm glad to see YouTube doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see, Google I/O, which is scheduled for, I think it's the end of May. And Google I/O is the annual developer conference that Google puts on. I'm sorry, it's May 11th, so it is next week. And so they're starting to release, and I believe that's mostly online again, if I remember correctly. But they're going to be doing, or they've released the list of things that are kind of their focus areas. And on the What's New list, a new version of Android coming. It's Android 13. Let's see, some new AR developer tools, which I'm not really surprised about. Some new things in Google Play, which is their distribution platform, and also some innovation in the Chrome operating system. So excited to hear about that. They also are teasing a, quote, new era for Google Home, which I believe you're a Google Home user, right, Dr. Fryer?
We're all in with that, baby. No Amazon matinees for us.
Yep, there you go. And so interesting stuff. We will definitely cover it when we have an opportunity to, probably 2 weeks from tonight. We'll cover those things there, but particularly the Chrome operating system. And since we do talk about privacy and the tech correction a lot, I'm also curious to see what's happening with Google Home.
And we shouldn't assume everybody knows this and does this, but the Google I/O conference is an example of many conferences, but it has tons of eyeballs and Twitter users focusing on it. The hashtag for that event is a great hashtag to follow to see what other people are hearing and seeing and responding to, and as a back channel. Jason and I have talked in the past of someday, meeting in person again, and the Google I/O conference would certainly be a cool place for us to rendezvous. But yeah, that's awesome. And I'll say this, just like Apple, there are some amazing pieces of media that I know Google has probably already created, because it's next week, that they're going to be showcasing, that are just fantastic, and they're going to be informative. And yes, they're going to be about products and services, and there's sales in this and whatever. But as someone who loves media literacy and digital storytelling and just communication with media, these become awesome little case studies of, wow, look at this, and breaking it down and analyzing it. And so that can be really something interesting to take a look at with students, as well as thinking about, hey, look at the new things that Google's brought to the table. So exciting. And it'll be interesting to see also how they sort of blend the online with the face-to-face. This conference that I attended this week in Orlando, first time I've been at an event that felt normal. I mean, there were a few folks masking. Of course, this was in Florida, so it's like being in Texas. Not really any kind of mask mandates for anything. For Uber, airplane mask requirements are done. I flew Southwest Airlines. So anyway, it'll be interesting, but because it really does vary by the locale, and usually they're in Northern California for this. So I'm going to predict it's still going to have a very strong, online and virtual experience because of COVID. But I will say, wow, it was fantastic to be back to a face-to-face conference that just really felt normal, and that was super cool. So hopefully we're all going to be soon in that kind of a boat. Not that we're all leaving COVID behind. I think it's like the common cold and the seasonal flu that we've had to deal with and we still deal with every year. I'm afraid that we're probably in that category. But yay, Google I.O. And thanks for the heads up. So remember, folks, next week we will not have a show, but Google I.O. will be on. So if you're wanting some evening tech-related watching, then if you don't catch it live, watching the archive, because they'll, I'm sure stream it all on YouTube and it'll be instantly available for replay. That'll be some good stuff to check out Wednesday, and I will be doing that myself.
Cool. Okay, do you want to cover that AI one before we move on?
Yeah, this was interesting. This is an Engadget article from May 2nd, 2022, and it also kind of relates a little bit to a Geek of the Week that I'll share. But the headline from Engadget is Google fires another AI researcher who reportedly challenged findings. I have not yet watched the Netflix documentary, which I had just pulled up, and I'm going to have to search my Twitter for to find. I think it's Coded Bias, maybe. Have you seen that before?
No, I haven't.
Okay. I attended a session at Atlas on implicit bias. And so Coded Bias on Netflix is a documentary that investigates the bias in algorithms after MIT Media Lab researcher Joy Boulami uncovered flaws in facial recognition technology. We've talked on the show about some Google AI researchers being fired, apparently, because they have findings that Google didn't like, which that's really not the way science is supposed to work. That, we just pay the scientists that do the work that we want, and we fire all the others. So the New York Times reported that Google's firing of machine learning scientist Satrajit Chattery in March, soon after it refused to publish a paper that Chattery and others wrote, challenging earlier findings that computers could design some chip components more effectively than humans. The scientist was reportedly allowed to collaborate on a paper disputing those claims after he and fellow authors expressed reservations, but was dismissed after a resolution committee rejected the paper, and researchers hope to bring the issue to CEO Sundar Pichai and Alphabet's board of directors. So there's debate about, this termination. And then, yes, the 2020 firing was ethicist Timnit Gebru. And that paper that Gebru wrote led to two others following suit. And then there was another termination of Margaret Mitchell in early 2021. In that case, Google had claimed that Mitchell violated data confidentiality policies. I mean, with HR things, you never, it seems like, have the whole story, and there's confidentiality involved and lawyers and all kinds of things. But it does appear there is an unquestioned pattern of firing that Google has engaged in. Whether some of these were legitimate, it just really smells bad that you're firing AI researchers that are concluding in their papers things that may not fit into your desired worldview as a company. So AI research is important, and open and free academic research is really, really important. So I'm thankful for the journalists that can cover this, and that we do have a legal system that allows for litigation and lawsuits, even though those things can be ugly and they're certainly not perfect. At least we have some recourse in our country for violations of employment law and things like that. So there's also allegations of harassment and other things that are involved in here. So it's kind of a mess. Any thoughts on this, Dr. Neiffer?
Other than, science fictions provide us a long history of what ifs if we allow AI to get out of control. So the bottom line is that while those are science fiction, right? I think we need to tread very carefully in this space. And I'd prefer if the technology is developed by people that were in a room disagreeing about it, as opposed to a bunch of people who were in the room agreeing about it. Because I think that makes better structures, it makes better rules of engagement. And I think that's a really important thing for human beings. So I would just say, disappointing. I hope that there is actually a backstory here that has nothing to do with that person's job and what they were doing there, but something else that's related. So where this AI thing is not part of it at all, but it is, a touch suspicious.
Absolutely. Well, and it highlights ethics and the importance of talking about ethics. I don't know if I mentioned live on the show last week, but I've got my assignments for I think I did for next fall, and I'll be teaching 2 sections of robotics in addition to 2 sections of computer applications for middle schoolers, and talking about ethics and bias and AI. These are all really important things that we talk about and discuss. So, where would you like to go next, sir, on our list of topics, seeing that we have about 15 or 16 minutes left?
Sure. I guess maybe we shouldn't be surprised, but The Verge reported on May 2nd that there was a study done by Mozilla, and they have a guide called Privacy Not Included. The guide lead talked to The Verge, and as it turns out, there are 2 types of apps that are terrible about keeping your privacy private, and it's mental health apps and prayer apps. So people looking for mental health assistance or spiritual guidance, who they themselves are somehow vulnerable, now are vulnerable to privacy pieces. And I just think that, man, the free app economy just keeps biting us over and over again. But there are a lot of questions about how legit the privacy pieces are. But with Mozilla's foundation talking about this, and not just people like Apple, I think there's some legitimacy to it. I will tell you that I did look at the apps that were on here. I don't have any of them currently installed. I have had a few of them installed in the past. So disappointing that's the kind of ranking that these apps look like.
So I'm dropping in a new article under privacy that I just saw right before we got on the show, and we are not a political show, so we will not be delving into the projected changes in the Roe v. Wade law in the United States and the imminent Supreme Court evidently change and all this stuff happening. But we've got a lot of things happening with abortion law in the United States. Consumer Reports, which my mother would consider to be one of her ultimate sources, back in January. Actually, this was of 2020, so this isn't a 2022 article. The headline is, "What Your Period Tracker app knows about you. These apps are popular, but they raise concerns about what happens to the very personal data they collect." And the tweet that I read, sharing this, was saying, if indeed abortions are outlawed, and there's crazy laws that Louisiana has now about trying to say that an abortion is first-degree murder, chargeable offense, and there's crazy stuff going on. We need to be aware of the data that we're giving away. We need to be aware that everything that we share in our devices, in our phone, on our computer, all of it is hackable. Every single bit of it can be compromised and taken by bad actors. We talked about on the show probably years ago, and we can say that now at 258 episodes. The Chinese government hacked the Pentagon's records for the classification process. So the most intimate and secret details about people's lives that they're required to tell when they're going through a security classification process to get a secret or top secret or whatever level security clearance for the U.S. government. Evidently, China hacked all that and got all of that stuff. Okay, so there are lots of ways that apps help our lives, help us to have convenience and these kinds of things. There's another article, I guess I'll drop this one in too, that says that there's a data broker who is selling. This is let me get this. It's not Consumer Reports. They're selling the data for people that have gone into a Planned Parenthood clinic, and they're selling that to whoever wants to have that. So this is a Vice article that was from May 3rd. Data broker is selling location data of people who visit abortion clinics. This is why we need privacy law, ladies and gentlemen. We shouldn't have a complete open, do whatever you want. There are no laws stopping people from not only taking your data, but selling your data and then doing whatever they want with it. We are behind the times. I do not have today the answer, and I never probably will, but I'll have an opinion. But I know, because Jason and I talk about this all the time, that privacy is a big issue. It's really important. There's a lot of ways that privacy continues to be under assault, and we don't have laws protecting us in the United States from things like this. And so there's a lot going on with privacy. So
Yep,
the sky is falling. The sky is falling, Dr. Neiffer. What are we going to do?
I know. Yeah, story of 10. Let's see here. Just a kind of a creator woes me. Facebook has announced that they are shutting down their podcast platform, which I guess maybe what I would say is that I was surprised to hear that Facebook had a podcast platform, because I just didn't know that, and we may have even talked about it on the show. But one of the things I'm always reminded of is that, and I was trying to remember what the tool was before the show, but I did go all in on a tool at one point because it was the niftiest thing ever, and put probably hundreds of hours into it. This was 2008, 9-ish, and I really wish I remember what the tool was. And then it was announced about 6 months after I started using it that it was just going away. There was no financial viability for it, and it was gone. Let alone the big platforms that cancel stuff all the time. Google is famous for not following through with even popular projects. Microsoft has a bit of that rumor as well. For those of you that are still Zune fans, for example. But the bottom line is that it's a sad thing if you were hosting a podcast there, because you're going to have to find a way to do it elsewhere now. So, creator beware.
I want to pick up one more privacy article. We actually put it under the personal technology, which it certainly fits there too. I'm going to move it down here under personal technology. This is a Lifehacker article from April 8th, and it's called "Why You Should Buy the Dumbest TV You Can Find." Now, at one point, and this was from April the 8th, at one point I had read an article saying that it was basically impossible to find a new television that wasn't a quote smart television that didn't phone home and report all of this data to you. Much like I think Dr. Neiffer now is a Mac Mini user with awesome screens, and he just kind of plugs that in, and hey, if it's time to upgrade, he can keep his awesome screens. He's just going to, swap out a new Mac Mini or some other kind of computing device that's going to plug in. That really is the best model from a privacy standpoint for us as consumers with our televisions. Have your Roku, have your Apple TV, have your Chromecast or Chromecast. Yeah. Whatever, flavor you want to go with, plug that in. Not to say that's not collecting data. There's data collection that's happening with any kind of device. But, the idea of your smart television having technology that you just about can't turn off, or that's going to be really, really difficult to turn off, seems invasive. So this is getting more on the consumer side. Have you shopped for a new television recently, Dr. Neiffer? And
I did put up a television actually up at work to create another conferencing station in my office, mostly as kind of a COVID protocol. But one of the things that I know from working with IT folks at the University of Montana is that they told us, we contacted them for recommendations twice now for kind of mounted office TVs. And, these are things that have to last, will last for a long, 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 long time, right? I would guess somewhere between 7 and 10 years, because that's actually the last television that we recycled out of our office was 9 years old. And low resolution, and very heavy too, I might add. But we were told that there were certain brands that they didn't want to do. And I believe they asked us, I want to say it's a Vizio TV, and there's a certain kind of Vizio TV they wanted us to utilize. And it does have onboard software, smart TV software. It's not quite a dumb TV, but they said that they haven't run into issues with that brand when it comes to non-net connected televisions not getting firmware updates, or in some cases time bombing themselves out after a couple of years. And they said they just didn't want to deal with that, so they recommended that certain class of Vizio TV.
Yeah, that's good to know. Well, those are things too, like with Consumer Reports or other, it could be EFF, other groups that are going to monitor that. Probably what's the Wire, the really good one for Wirecutter. Different companies that are monitoring consumer electronics and getting that kind of advice. But it is, I mean, I think I've mentioned that we have firmware on some of the very inexpensive smart switches that I have installed and configured with our Google that now are only in Chinese. And I need to ask our daughter next time. I finally did upgrade firmware, but it was like, wow, this really is trust, because I do not read Mandarin. I have no idea what this says. And when you look on your, Google Nest, was Google Wi-Fi, I guess now it's in Google Home. I mean, why are these things uploading? Like, do they really need a phone home? And do you remember the Mirai botnet?
Yeah.
I think I might have worn, maybe I wore a tinfoil hat for that show. I think I've done that actually before on the show. But yes, it is true. Your Internet of Things devices at home can be hacked. There were a couple kids, one of them I think was in Alaska, who, were trying to devise a way to make denial of service attacks to improve their Minecraft server business, and they ended up creating this monster that was used in one of the largest denials of service attacks that the globe has ever seen before. And so, anyway, as you're buying smart devices, you want to think about these things. And just like you said, I hadn't heard the term time bomb. Does that mean it would like actually not only not be upgradable, but it would like stop working? Is that what a time bomb would be?
Yeah, that's what I've read about such things, and actually in firmware, in cheap firmware for IoT devices. But yeah, and I'd heard that was an issue, that TVs just weren't working anymore, and they were told they were past their useful life. And I think we also talked about that in regards to Sonos, that was trying to get rid of their oldest hardware by rendering it useless, even though it wasn't functionally useless. And it's a real issue, and is part of the e-waste problem that we have right now with electronics around the world.
Well, back to the podcast platform Facebook article that you shared. I would just tell people or recommend to people, finding a good place to host your podcasts is important, because companies do come and go, and you end up sometimes, if you're hosting stuff, changing web companies. I think I've been with at least 4, if not 5 different web host companies since, 2003, maybe even more than that. Our podcast and all my podcast content is on the Amazon cloud now, on Amazon S3. It's so affordable and cheap, and you can end up, linking it from different places. But we've had some content over the years. I know Cinch.fm was one of those platforms, and I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that were these really iPadio. I love these like audio, an Audio Boo, which was Audio Boom, and now it's freaking gone. And I don't honestly know how much of that content I've lost. The Internet Archive does save a bunch of things, but this is just another dynamic that we want to be aware of as far as content. Maybe at some point, and if with Elon's purchase of Twitter, which I know we talked a lot about in the last show, I think it'd be wonderful to have a renaissance of champions. And I know Alan Levine and others are part of some groups that really champion the self-hosting WordPress, the self-hosted, website, being able to not just put everything on Facebook or on Twitter or on a social media account, where you might have actually given up rights, and the extractability of that data may really be tough in terms of like, it's your data, but there's not an open API or standard where you're going to be able to suck that information and that data off to be able to move it and do something else with it. So that's not something that most people are probably concerned about. But as a tech geek and somebody who loves sharing media and publishing and sharing, there's, I'm sure, people listening to this that also do, finding a good place to host your podcasts. And what I have found is having a place that's independent of your web host. I don't think Amazon's web services are going anywhere for a really long time. Apple has definitely changed stuff with their iCloud and .Mac, and I've lost content actually in the past, my own fault. But anyway, those are important issues. And I wasn't aware that Facebook had a podcasting platform either. So yeah, maybe that's part of the reason they had to shut it down. And nobody knew.
Yeah, because no one knew. And if people are going to know, it's people like me that prefer.
Right.
Okay, let's see here. We are near the top of the hour.
We got about 6 minutes though. We got about 6 minutes because we started a couple minutes late, so it's okay.
So let's do a couple in the personal technology one. The first one that's super interesting. T-Mobile had an Un-carrier announcement today, which is their kind of marketing speak for something new. It wasn't anything all that interesting. Other than there's something here in regards to connectivity, right? And it's a topic that I'm very interested in because I think there needs to be more competitors around the United States as opposed to less in this space because it's going to decrease costs and increase speed. But T-Mobile now offers a 5G home internet a product where you can, for $50 a month, guaranteed forever. This is the price for this service forever and ever and ever. You can get 5G internet, which essentially is a box in your house that has a cell antenna on it and goes over the towers and creates an internet experience for you. If I wasn't satisfied right now with my cable connection, which is $400 down and $20 up for $75 a month, I would seriously consider doing this. Or if I had terrible wired internet in my neighborhood, but I've got a pretty good T-Mobile signal, I think this would be a very interesting thing to have. There's a 15-day free trial. They'll help you move away from your other broadband provider if you have late or early exit fees up to $500 in that. There's a price lock at $50 a month. And if you happen to be one of T-Mobile's subscribers that is at the Magenta Max level, it's only $30 a month just to add this service on. And I imagine for some families, that would be, $30 extra a month might be just useful to have around your house, right? As a second option for Wi-Fi if you have enough people on it.
Wow. As someone who's going to be moving soon and looking at houses, my top choice would be to be in an AT&T fiber neighborhood.
Yes.
That is a great price, though. The two numbers that I don't see are what is the upstream as well as downstream.
Yeah.
It says it's going to be 100 meg, but that's, I'm sure, talking 100 megs down. Our AT&T fiber is a 300 synchronous connection, 300 up, 300 down. That actually makes a difference when I'm uploading podcasts. When we were with Cox, we had 1,000 for a while. We had 1,000 down, but only 30 up. They wouldn't give us any more than that. And my other question is a quota question. In the wireless world, we've seen quotas with respect to how much, like tethering data. 5 gigs used to be the limit. This will be something like, no, this will happen, but like with the grandkids someday. Well, back in my day, we could only have 5 gigs of data on the hotspot. With 5G speeds, just like everything else getting faster and 4K web streams and all these things, you can use data a lot faster. So I am very interested in that personally, but I'm going to be interested to ask what the upstream as well as downstream is, and then if there is a quota monthly in terms of how much total bandwidth you're allowed. That's an exciting announcement, and especially interesting that they're going to have this for life thing. That kind of makes you say, okay, is it something I want to jump on now because it won't be offered forever, and then I can keep it and have it grandfathered? Because that does seem like a great price, especially as a subscriber.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, let's see. One more question to grab maybe before we call it quits. Let's see.
I'll just give a quick statistic because it was interesting to me. The Verge reported that Wordles purchased by the New York Times has brought them tens of millions of new users. So for the cranks in the world that wondered, why does the New York Times want Wordle? And by the way, there's not even any advertising on the Wordle website. It's because they now have tens of millions of new users that they didn't before. So cheers to New York Times for spotting a gem.
Tens of millions. Wow. All right. Well, speaking of gems, Dr. Neiffer, what would you have for us as a Geek of the Week this week as we wrap up?
Yeah, this one was really interesting to me, and it's from our friend Kevin Toffel over at About Chromebooks. But basically, there is an internal Chrome operating system engagement metric that you can get either on Chrome OS, and I also know that it works in the Chrome browser. And all you need to do is open up to a new tab and type in Chrome : // site engagement /, and it will show you a report that is your site engagement. So to give you an example of the report for me, hold on, I need to copy, paste, to give you an idea of what sites that I access the most. My top 10 as of late includes eBay, Twitter, Gmail, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Google Docs, which I'm 99% sure is the document for EdTech SR. And right after that, by the way, is StreamYard. So that tells you that I'm probably correct there. And then there's a cool router hacking site called Wireless Joint that I like reading, and then 9to5 Google. So, it's a legit report looking at your history to kind of give you a sense of where you're spending most of your time percentage-wise on your machine.
And I have some statistics. We have talked, and after I give my Geeks of the Week, have talked about 16 different web links tonight, but there are 12 that we did not talk about. So there you go. It's helpful to be highlighting those. My Geek of the Week, quickly, I'm going to do two. I have another podcast up. Oh my gosh. This is actually a recording of the presentation that I gave yesterday. It was Tuesday in Orlando, Florida. Originally, I had titled this, which I really like this title, how to teach about conspiracy theories without getting fired. But there were some folks that thought that should be changed. So it ended up being teaching about conspiracy theories and media literacy. But you can check out that audio and those slides. And if you're at all interested in media literacy, then there's probably something for you in that podcast. And then, Dr. Neiffer, this is my mind-blowing Geek of the Week, and I don't have one of these very often. Have you heard, sir, before of the Google Teachable Machine website? Do you know about this?
No.
Okay, so I'm gonna drop my tweet in this session at Atlas on Monday, which was about implicit bias. I created an algorithm using visual AI that identifies whether you're holding up 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 fingers, and I trained it with hundreds of images using my webcam. And one of the things that the folks running this workshop were pointing out is that having students use this kind of a tool really does help them understand the idea of implicit bias and how important a large data set is and what a representative sample is and why you might or might not be able to take a tool that you're creating like this and use it differently. We actually have high school students who have just developed, and they're showing it this week to the principal. We call him the director of our primary division, which is pre-K and K. They've written the code to take pictures of the license plates of parents as they come on campus, cross-reference it to the database, and then show the teacher in the classroom whose parents are in the carpool line so they can send the kids outside. High school students have done that with AI. That is a free tool from Google, ladies and gentlemen. And it's just like my mind. It doesn't happen that often. Of course, I haven't been to face-to-face conferences for a while, but even when I go, it's not that often that my mind is blown. And I was getting pretty excited sitting on the front row, and they were like, "Is this good? You like?" I'm like, "This is incredible." So,
well, I need to add to that. If you need any evidence that AI needs some serious discussions, it's the power of that tool that Google's just posting for people for free to play with.
Absolutely. Yeah. But some really, creative ways we can think about using it. And then kids actually using AI and training the algorithm and it's really, really cool. I'll be developing some lessons in the year to come, I predict, with that tool. So, Dr. Neiffer, when you're not here helping us become more illuminated on the topics of educational technology, where can people find you?
Well, I haven't left Twitter yet, so find me there at Tech Savvy Teach. What about you, sir?
I'm only on Mastodon, so just come find me there. No, wesfryer.com/after. Yes, I am on Mastodon, and I've been posting a bit more. It's a bit of a renaissance over on Mastodon because people are concerned that Elon may do some crazy things to Twitter. But I'm W Fryer on Twitter. So this has been the EdTech Situation Room. We are an almost weekly podcast coming to you on Wednesday nights at 8 p.m. No, you're 8 p.m.? Yeah, no. What are you?
Yeah, 8 p.m.
Yeah, you're 8 p.m. Mountain. Okay.
Yeah.
And I'm not in Eastern time yet. I'm at 9 p.m. Central time. And we are located on the web at edtechsr.com. You can follow us on Twitter at edtechsr. We invite you to subscribe to our Substack, which you can find at edtechsr.substack.com. But you can also find us on Facebook. You can find us on YouTube. Generally, we're getting our shows published, because we sometimes have a slacker team that's doing this work, a couple days after our show. But the cool thing about StreamYard, which is our platform we use, is it immediately streams to both Facebook and YouTube, and those are automatically archived. And hopefully, Jason and I don't misspeak, because we'd have to go in and delete the show or something else if we, said something we regretted. And I don't think we've actually done that in a really long time. Not to say we need, knock on wood. So we want to thank you for tuning in. Encourage you to reach out to us. Let us know. You can tweet to us at our individual Twitter handles or at EdTechSR, which we'll probably see at some point, although maybe not as fast. And we will be gone next week on May the 11th, but Google I.O. will be happening, and we will be back here in 2 weeks. So until then, we encourage you to stay savvy, stay safe, and share the EdTech Situation Room, because we love sharing podcasts, and we know that this is a great way to help other people get connected and learn hopefully new and valuable things, and also connect to the community. So until next time, take care.